Your brain does things no machine on Earth can do. And few weeks ago, a team of engineers at Northwestern University in Chicago did something that might change how machines think and how humans heal. They made something new, and they plugged it into a living brain, and the brain talked back. Every attempt before this, and there have been hundreds, failed that test. Until few weeks ago. Right now, inside your skull, there are roughly 86 billion neurons. Each one is connected to up to 10,000 others. That's a quadrillion connections, a number so large it doesn't fit inside human intuition. And the entire thing, this machine that writes poetry, recognizes faces, falls in love, solves physics problems, runs on 20 watts. That's less than the bulb in your refrigerator. To do even a fraction of what your brain does, this is what we've had to build. Industries, data centers, nuclear reactors. Training one version of GPT-4 consumed 50 gigawatt-hours of electricity, enough to power the entire city of San Francisco for 3 days, for a single training run. Amazon signed a deal to buy power from an entire nuclear reactor, 960 megawatts, just to feed its AI servers. Microsoft is restarting the 3 Mile Island plant. The Stargate initiative is going to spend $500 billion on new data centers, more than the Apollo space program. We are building nuclear power plants to do what your brain does for free. And that's the problem the team at Northwestern was trying to solve. Here's what they did. They took two materials, a semiconductor called molybdenum disulfide and graphene, pure carbon 1 atom thick. They mixed them into a liquid. They made ink. And then they printed a neuron. Not a simulation of one, not a digital model, a physical, flexible, postage stamp-sized device printed out of ink onto a polymer film thin enough to bend that fires electrical signals almost identical to a biological neuron. Then they plugged it into a living mouse brain, and the brain responded as if it were being spoken to by one of its own cells. Now, to understand why that matters and why every attempt before this failed, you need to understand what a neuron actually is. And it's stranger than most people realize. A neuron spends most of its time doing absolutely nothing. It just sits there, negative on the inside, positive on the outside, like a tiny battery holding charge, waiting. Then something happens. Maybe another neuron fires nearby. Tiny protein gates in the membrane open. Positive ions rush in, and the voltage flips from negative to positive in about 1 millisecond. 1 millisecond. That flip is the whole message. That's the entire signal. Scientists call it an action potential. Everyone else just calls it a spike. 86 billion neurons, a quadrillion connections, and the entire language is fire or don't fire. The meaning isn't in how loud it is, it's in when it fires, how often, which neurons it talks to, what fires back. That's what Silicone has been trying to copy for 80 years. And that's where we kept going wrong. The device you're watching this on is built from silicon. Billions of transistors, tiny switches, either on or off. All identical, all flat, all rigid. All fixed in place the moment the chip is manufactured. Your brain is the opposite of all of that. It's soft. It's three-dimensional. It's constantly rewiring itself as you learn, forming new connections, pruning old ones. Every neuron is different, Every region specializes. There's no central processor. It's a distributed, living, self-modifying machine. Silicon achieves complexity by having billions of identical things. The brain achieves complexity by having billions of different things. Researchers have been trying to bridge that gap for decades. They've built neuromorphic chips, silicon designed to mimic neural firing patterns. Some of them are genuinely impressive, but they all have the same fundamental limitation. The signals they produce are the wrong shape. A biological spike is curved, elegant, with precise timing and precise peaks. Silicon chips fire blocky, square pulses. They're close enough for simulations. They're useless for speaking to a living brain. And there's a second problem, even bigger. Silicon is rigid. The brain is soft and wet. You can't simply implant a flat, hard chip into living neural tissue. The body rejects it. Scar tissue builds up around it. The signals degrade within months. To build something that could truly talk to the brain, you'd need a device that was soft, flexible, biocompatible, and capable of producing the exact curved, organic, millisecond-precise spikes a real neuron produces. Nobody had ever done that. Not once. Not in 80 years. Until Mark Hersum's team at Northwestern did something everyone else would have called a mistake. Because the thing that actually made this work, the reason the brain responded, was an accident. And it was the thing every other lab had been throwing away. We talked about what they made at the start. Ink, printed on polymer film. Here's what's actually in that ink, and how they got it to behave like a living cell. MOS2, molybdenum disulfide, is a semiconductor. It can switch between carrying current and blocking it. Graphene is pure carbon, 1 atom thick, and it conducts electricity almost perfectly. Together, suspended in liquid, they form an electronic ink. They loaded the ink into an aerosol jet printer, basically an extremely precise inkjet, and printed the circuits onto flexible polymer. That part wasn't new. Other teams had tried this approach. The signals they got were still the wrong shape. So here's where Hersum's team did something nobody else had. Every previous team faced the same obstacle. The polymer holding the ink together interfered with electrical flow. It was treated as contamination, so everyone burned it away after printing. Heat the substrate, remove the polymer entirely, leave only the pure semiconductor behind. Hersum's team kept it. Not all of it. They partially decomposed the polymer, just enough to leave behind a thin, uneven layer of carbon residue distributed throughout the MOS2. That carbon residue changed the physics of the device. When voltage was applied, tiny conductive filaments would grow through the material. Current would flow through them. They'd heat up, and at a very specific temperature, they would suddenly collapse. That collapse produced a clean, sharp spike in the electrical signal. A curved, organic spike, with exactly the right rise time, exactly the right peak, exactly the right shape. They didn't engineer this behavior. They stumbled into it by leaving in what everyone else had thrown away. Then came the real test. Hersum partnered with neuroscientist Indira Raman, whose lab works with Purkinje neurons, some of the largest, most elaborate cells in the cerebellum, the cells that control motor coordination. They took slices of living mouse cerebellum, kept alive in solution, connected the printed device, and fired it. The living neurons responded. Not as if being poked by an electrode, not as if a machine was stimulating them. They responded exactly as if the signal had come from another living neuron, a biological peer. That's what happened a few days ago in Illinois. That's what Hersem's team published in Nature Nanotechnology. And that's why this could change everything. We already have devices that talk to the nervous system. Cochlear implants let deaf people hear. Retinal implants let some blind patients detect light. Deep brain stimulators treat Parkinson's tremors. They work, but imperfectly. The signals they send are blunt approximations of what a real neuron would produce. The brain adapts around them, but there's always a gap, always noise in the translation. A device that speaks the brain's actual language, the right spike shape, the right timing, flexible enough to sit against living tissue without rejection, could close that gap entirely. Imagine a cochlear implant where music sounds the way it used to. A retinal implant that restores not just light, but detail, faces, color, motion. A spinal cord interface that lets paralyzed patients move again, not jerkily, but naturally. The way the brain already knows how to move a body. And beyond medicine, computing. If you can print neurons cheaply, flexibly, at scale, you can build computers that work the way the brain does, not by running brute force calculations, but by recognizing patterns through networks of spiking cells. Neuromorphic computing. The brain's architecture, finally in hardware. And the energy savings would be historic. The brain runs on 20 watts. A system built on this technology could perform complex AI tasks using a fraction of the power we burn today. No nuclear reactors required. I want to be honest about where this research actually stands. These experiments were done on slices of mouse brain, kept alive briefly in a lab dish. The printed device was connected externally through an electrode. We are not close to implanting this in a human being. The next steps are enormous. These devices need to survive inside living tissue for months, years, decades. They need to communicate reliably without degrading. The immune system needs to accept them. The brain, already one of the most complex systems in the known universe, needs to integrate them naturally without fighting them. None of that is solved yet. But history has a pattern. The transistor was demonstrated in a Bell Labs lab in 1947. 60 years later, there was one in every pocket on Earth. Penicillin was discovered on a contaminated petri dish in 1928. It saved 200 million lives in the decades that followed. The first neurosurgical implant, a cochlear stimulator, was placed in a human skull in 1961. A prototype, a curiosity. Today, nearly 1 million people hear through its descendants. What happened in Hersem's lab last week was one of those moments. Someone made a small piece of ink behave like a living cell, and a real brain cell answered, as if to say, "Yes, I understand you. Talk to me." You have 86 billion neurons inside your skull, 1,000 trillion connections, firing or not firing, at millisecond precision. The simplest possible language carrying the entire weight of thought, memory, love, grief, identity, consciousness. And a few weeks ago, we learned how to say one word in that language. What happens when we learn the rest?